There are moments when you know God is with you. You feel it in the air. You feel it in your bones. They're not the moments you'd maybe expect them to be. The big moments, like weddings, births, baptisms, or funerals. At least they're not for me. I barely remember my wedding day. I know at some point the dog who was wearing a bow tie for the occasion, I know he got loose and went running up and down the aisle, tail wagging, just delighted to finally be given the attention he deserves. It was definitely the happiest day of his life. It might have been the happiest day of mine, but as I said, I don't really remember. The day was a blur. I don't remember a word of whatever it was the minister said. And so if God was there, I missed it. Linus's birth, it happened, I guess. He's here, so it must have happened, but that's a haze too. Obviously, God showed up for his baptism. That's the whole point of a baptism. But again, there was a lot to coordinate, family and logistical stuff, and all of that was more front of mind for me. My funeral might be the first major life event I actually get to be present for. I won't be officiating it. I won't be responsible for making sure there's food and everything all taken care of. So in whatever way it can be said that I'll be there, I'll be there. I look at the pictures. We're cutting the cake and we're holding the baby. But if I'm honest, I don't see God in the pictures. I see myself looking back from the photographs, either so present to what was happening that God was the last thing I was thinking about, or else so distracted that God was the last thing I was thinking about. I felt God's presence in our church. Sometimes when we sing, I have this sense that something is being given to us in the music that is more than the music. Things I don't fully understand and struggle to accept, they take the shape of truths when we sing. For me, a lot of things are only true when you hear them sung in 4-part harmony. When we sing, I feel the truth of things that I otherwise am not so sure about. It's possible when we sing for me to trust that God is with me in a way that it isn't always easy to trust that God is with me. And some Sundays, the way John plays a line, a fragment of a hymn on the organ, that will open a locked door inside of me. And all week, just because of that sound, all week light will have a way to get in me. And God's healing love and God's peace will have a way to get inside of me. But it's not only the music. A number of you have told me that when your family has faced a hard time or a loss, it's been really important to be able to tell your kids that you will come to church and share what's happened with the whole congregation and ask for prayer and let the community hold the sadness. And I also know that some of you want to share, but you can't. It would be too hard to say what you need to say. The words would break you. And I think the space between, the silence between the joys and the concerns that are shared, I think there is a kind of sharing that happens in that silence too. Something is being given to us in that silence too. We are giving ourselves to one another in that silence. God is giving us God's own self in that silence. In some churches, the measure of God's presence in worship is the intensity of the praise. It's when people sing out and clap and raise their hands that they sense God is there with them. I think in our church, the measure of God's presence in worship is often the depth of the silence. It's the quality of the stillness within the silence. And again, I'll be honest, I don't know if I feel God's presence in church every Sunday. I am the minister, so I guess I have no one to blame for that but myself. But I say this maybe to normalize it. My whole heart is in this. And even still, some weeks just leave me cold. If God was here, God must have snuck in and out the back doors without me noticing. God isn't always present, not even in the times and in the places. And God is really supposed to be present. That's how it feels, anyway. And not only in church when the sermon is boring, or on your wedding day when the whole thing is a whirlwind, but when you pray and your prayers aren't answered, when the hurt doesn't stop hurting. In ordinary, day-to-day life, when the blessings you know are blessings feel more like burdens. A lot of people describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, by which they mean that they have an awareness sometimes. They have an awareness of something bigger than themselves. They feel a part of it and feel it to be a part of them. They encounter it while, experimenting with psychedelics or even just hiking through the woods. And I envy them, because when I hike through the woods, the only awareness I really ever have is of the bug bites I'll be returning home with and how much my feet hurt. I'm friends with a few other ministers who really want me to try psychedelics. And I should say that I have no moral objections to this or anything like that. I'm just not interested. They keep telling me that I will experience God's presence like I've never experienced God's presence before. And they tell me this with the enthusiasm of the kind of Christians that go door to door trying to convert you. And I've just never cared much for proselytizing. I suspect that I and maybe a lot of people who show up in church, I suspect at least I might more accurately be described as religious but not spiritual. I'm never really chasing an awareness of God's presence like a high. I'm here because I like the sense of community. I like the traditions and the rituals and the old words. I like being confronted by certain ideals and moral aspirations when, even in my job, they're often the last thing I think of Monday through Friday. I like being challenged to do more to honor my own values. I like being pushed to be of service to my neighbors in need. And sometimes, as I said, in certain moments it does feel like God pulls back the veil here and gives something of God's own self to us. But God visits us and vanishes. God is as elusive as God is generous. And I guess I believe that's how we know that it's God we're talking about and not something else, something lesser, something not bigger than us but smaller than us, something we could manipulate or conjure or control. Many of the mystics, the women and men who wrote the book on feeling God's presence, they actually talk about it in this very way. They say that God becomes more real to them as God becomes less present to them. Because what they experience then is not their own feelings of God's presence, but the presence itself, which, being God's, is ultimately beyond human feeling. God is not absent. God is present more truly and more purely in absolute, transcendent holiness. Most of the mystics don't like this very much. It's not fun for them or comforting. It's often painful and confusing. They write about that. But they come to describe their faith as stronger and their lives as full of contentment and peace. They come to understand what Jacob came to understand when he exclaimed, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He awoke to this realization, having literally awoken from a dream. But this doesn't have to happen while you're sleeping. Jacob's words are words I live my whole life by. They, almost more perfectly than anything else in all Scripture, they capture what faith means to me, how faith works for me, what faith feels like for me, which is, a lot of the time, nothing much, nothing rapturous, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing I notice or appreciate in the moment. Later, sometimes it's at night as I'm reflecting back on the events of the day. Other times it's years afterwards. But later, only later, I'll awaken to it. Although awaken is too strong a word, I'll just sense. I'll have this sense after the fact that what I couldn't sense before because I was too busy, too stressed, too shocked, too blind, too in it, too heartbroken, too whatever, I'll sense God then. I'll sense that God was with me. Not is with me now, but was with me then. God is actually most real to me in my memories. I can live any given moment without any awareness whatsoever of God's presence. But I can't relive those moments that way. It's like an image from the negative of an old photograph is slowly crystallizing and coming into focus. And a figure is appearing in the picture that wasn't there before. Sort of translucent at first, so you aren't sure what you're seeing, but then with more and more solidness. There at the altar, and in the hospital room, and beside the font, so that it's unmistakable. You see what was always there to see. God with you when you didn't know it, guiding, strengthening, rejoicing, providing, healing. One way to experience God's presence is to not know that what you are experiencing is God's presence. In gratitude for all that we feel, in gratitude for all that is more than we could ever feel, the presence we sense, the presence we wonder about, all the ways that God comes to us and upholds us and cheers us. In gratitude, the morning's offering will be given and received.